Well, well, well. Good morning. Good Sunday morning to you, my girl. How are you today, Shabs?
I'm good, buddy. How are you?
Oh, I'm excited.
I know you are.
I'm not...
I know you're excited, and I'm excited, and we'll all be excited together.
Welcome back. Welcome back to the Two Talking Fools. We are the Two Talking Fools, just two average, and I mean average girls taking their phone calls to the podcast.
You're welcome.
So you guys, we brought so many interviews recently. We have so many in store. This one that we're doing today, I'm like shaking.
I know. It's wild. It's wild. You guys asked, and we will deliver for you.
Well, you know what it is? Why in the true crime has taken, back in the day, what was that show we had? We had Unsolved Mysteries.
Yep.
You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And there were other shows. I think that was the start. The love for true crime and crime, series and shows and
Law
stories.
And Order SVU and like all that stuff.
All that stuff. And today, you crazies out there who love it, you love these stories. And I mean that with love and sincerity.
But the real stories, though.
Yeah, the real ones.
Like the real ones.
The real ones.
We have a goodie for you today, our friend.
We have a goodie for you today. We promoted this a little bit. You guys are aware that we're doing this. Here we are. The Alvin Ridley case. Do it, Shabs.
Wild story.
On the show today, we have McCracken Poston Jr. Do I have that right, McCracken?
You got it.
Okay. And I did, and we did talk about earlier about making sure we say this right, because you're in the South and we're in the North and we can get names mixed up.
Shout out to our friend Georgia, by the way.
You don't have a monopoly on that.
All right. So welcome to the podcast. You guys, I just want to introduce you. McCracken Poston Jr. is on the podcast. American criminal defense attorney. He gained national attention for several notable cases, which were featured on TV series such as CNN Presents, Dateline NBC, A&E, American Justice, Forensic Files. Poston, you were elected and served as state representative in the Georgia House of Representatives. Your account in 2024, your account and representation of Alvin Ridley in the 1999 murder trial, where Ridley was accused of imprisoning his wife for decades before killing her, was published, titled Zenith Man, Death, Love, and Redemption in a Georgia Courtroom. No exceptions. And we have...
That's not part of the title. No
and
exceptions.
That's not part of the title. And we have McCracken on today. Thank you
for having me. This is a great honor. Your reputation precedes you. I've listened to some of your episodes and was very excited at the invitation.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The story of Alvin, and we're going to get into that, and we're going to dive deep. But what intrigued me about this story was the evolution of Alvin. Off air, we did talk. Every town, and I feel like every small town, even though you're down in Georgia, we're here in Connecticut. We have small towns. We have Alvins here too.
Oh, absolutely. And then when you think about it, the Alvins that you speak of, everybody already has their idea of their thoughts based off of their interaction with said individual. It could be somebody who, maybe socially awkward to some, or somebody who doesn't really talk to many people, or, but you always, like you said, every town has that Alvin Ridley. And this is
and sadly, because we've become more insular, I believe, and over the last couple of generations, that these individuals used to be tolerated a lot better. And in a small town, you generally know their names, or they've been given a nickname. And in bigger cities, they just kind of blend in with usually economically disadvantaged, and they're just kind of lumped together. But every town, all of us have an Alvin in our lives.
Oh, absolutely.
We do. We do. And I think that's why this particular story is going to, for some of you, it's going to enlighten you. For some of you, it's going to make you think. For some of you, it might change the way you conduct in simple interactions with the Alvins in your, and the stories is it's just an incredible one. So
And to remember that people are innocent until they are proven guilty beyond a reason.
Thank you.
okay. Well, Shaba, I mean I have to say this, you have always wanted to be a lawyer. So this
This is true.
this is true.
Never too late.
So let's start at the beginning. I would love for you to just paint us a picture of the town. Paint us a picture of just set the stage. Where are we at here in
Well,
Georgia?
we would love to have you visit Ringgold, Georgia. It is up in the northwest corner of Georgia, just below Chattanooga, Tennessee. As a matter of fact, Catoosa County abuts the state line and the Chattanooga, Tennessee city limits. So we have grown to be a kind of an extension of Chattanooga in the last couple of decades, especially. But it's always been, because of its geographic position, very close to Northeast Alabama, abutting Chattanooga, Tennessee, pretty close to the western extension of North Carolina.
Okay.
And because Tennessee is not a very tall state, we're a short drive from Virginia and Kentucky. And with Georgia's somewhat one stop shopping marriage laws, we became the marriage capital of the South. You've heard of 6 degrees of separation.
Yeah.
You're probably closer than 6 degrees to somebody who got married in Ringgold, Georgia over the last several decades. So much that Dolly Parton slipped down from Nashville with her recently lost husband, Carl Dean,
That's right.
and they married in May of 1966. About 3 weeks later, another couple went and got their marriage license. A young soldier about to get out of his Army obligation named Alvin Ridley and his fiancee from nearby town Rossville, Georgia, whose name was Virginia Hickey. They got that license 3 weeks after Dolly and Carl. They waited a few more weeks before getting married. But by the time George Jones and Tammy Wynette came to Ringgold, Georgia to get married, Virginia was missing. There was an article in the local paper that her parents put in with her photo saying that their daughter was missing, last seen with her husband, Alvin Ridley. Well, this was a huge insult to the young couple because they had already fended off her parents, who were very religious. This was a dry county back in the day, and even when I was growing up. But we had the cheat of a state line. It was very wet above it, so we could go get our booze across the line. That allowed us to remain pious and pure in North Georgia, according to what the officials wanted. So it became it made it last a lot longer than it should have, probably. We lost a lot of tax revenue, in other words, to Tennessee.
Yes.
So in any event, Virginia's parents staged a raid looking for beer in the young couple's apartment, and that really made them upset. I I knew Alvin for most of my childhood because he had a Zenith TV dealership in town. My father loved doing business, preferred doing business with outsider types. So Alvin's shop did not look like your classic TV shop with the very well designed living room scenes. It was a concrete floored place with new TVs in boxes and stacked on top of boxes, and old disemboweled TVs on a table that he was working on. And he was an odd character.
McCracken,
And
I want to stop you there. What did the town I believe you said that you said your dad was fond of Alvin. He had no problems with him. But what was the town like? What would some people say about Alvin?
well, Alvin, my sister went to high school with him. And my sister said, well, he's odd, he's weird. But, I was quite young, so I don't even remember the time that they were in high school together. But I do remember him being an unusual TV repairman. My sisters and I, we wore out the tuner knob going from channel 3 to channel 9 to channel 12, the three channels we could get out of Chattanooga. And because of the mountains, we're in the southern Appalachians. We couldn't get the Atlanta signals. So we just wore out 3912, 3912 till the knob literally wore off. And my father contacted Alvin, and my mother, apparently out working in the garden or something, just waved him on in the house. And I was watching live wrestling as a kid, about 12 or 13, and, beating up the couch cushions. And suddenly I realized there's a strange man behind me. And it was Alvin Ridley. Now, I didn't remember this until the representation of Alvin, because I represented him for his charge of murder later in life and charged with murdering his wife. I didn't remember this event until during the representation. Alvin just dropped a bomb in conversation that he had met Andre the Giant, the wrestler, and that Andre the Giant ate, as Alvin said it, 2 dozen eggs and a loaf of bread for breakfast. And it triggered a memory of the conversation I had with the TV repairman, because he was speaking my language now. He was telling me something that I went to school to tell everybody I knew somebody who knew Andre the Giant.
Right.
And so when he told it to me again, it kind of endeared me to Alvin. I realized I've got a history with this guy.
Yeah.
But the problem was Alvin was extremely difficult. The way he first approached me when we heard that, well, by the way, Alvin shuttered his business inexplicably in 1984. And he used to post these missives on the inside of the glass that were typed out on this old typewriter with, it looked like a serial killer's typewriter with all the hanging letters, and it was a forensic scientist, a real hit. But he would rattle on about that the county, and I'm using air quotes here, illegal seized, because he would turn illegally and seized into one word, illegal seized.
Yep.
That they illegal seized his van in 1984. Well, the more I realized, this reminded me that Alvin was well known as a frivolous litigant in a lot of civil litigation that always got dismissed. And somebody did a counterclaim, thought they had a judgment, and had the county seize an asset, which was a 1977 Chevy van, which in 1984 wasn't that old, and it was seized. And Alvin just went just off the wall about this seizure. And it became the focus for the rest of his life, really, of government interference with his business, government destruction of his business. And it was an obsession. And so when I started representing him, as he began to be questioned about his wife, because nobody had seen her since the parents put that article. That's what I thought, that nobody had seen her since they ran that article in 1968. And here it was, 1997.
So
29 years later.
yeah, see, that's the
And
thing. That's the thing, though. How does that happen? How does somebody at not right, Shaba? I mean, you were saying like,
Yeah, I was saying because I was watching something on YouTube where the sister, who was it, Trixie, I think her name was, who had said that they hadn't seen her in 30 something years. And to me, that's a hard pill to swallow because, and by no means am I saying anything negatively about the family. I'm just saying what I've viewed. That is very interesting that they could say they haven't seen somebody in 30 something years, and you accuse, somebody of, you accuse a spouse of keeping their wife away from their family, but the only effort that was made was an article that was put out saying that she was missing. I don't understand how people just automatically believed that Alvin did something to her. I don't know.
well, that was not the only effort that was made,
Uh,
but all of their efforts were deeply resented by both Alvin and Virginia. I later learned, and it was and I have 5 sisters. I grew up with 5 sisters. If any of them had married a guy who behaved strangely and then they disappeared, I understand. I think I would have been, on top of trying to flush her out. And the Hickeys were doing the same thing. So I think everybody was acting on what they thought was, you know, everyone's best interest, and even the prosecutors.
do you think
It
it's
just
flushing him out,
it.
or was it out of concern for her, though?
Well, I think it was, there was some resentment for some reason they really blamed Alvin. When, late in the case, I realized that Virginia would seem to be the one in charge of their relationship. But that gets to the end of the story. Alvin Alvin was just odd, but he was a hell of a TV repairman. And he seemed to be just gifted at TV repair. And it was amazing how 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 good he was. And that's the thing my dad admired. He had one Better Business Bureau complaint, which was later withdrawn. He told a lady that you live too close to this mountain, Channel 3 is always going to have this shadow on it. She filed a complaint against him. She had 2 more TV people out there trying to fix it. They told her the same thing. So she withdrew her complaint. That made Alvin very proud
yeah,
that he had such a good reputation. And that's one way that I could get a normally hard to focus client to focus. For example, Alvin just sees me on the street. I had just had my ass whipped in a race for the United States Congress. I actually saw him the night that I got my ass whipped. I said goodbye to everybody. I called my opponent and conceded defeat. And I had been winning my district in the Georgia State House by margins of like 70%. And then what happened was I was a Democrat, and the red tide of change was happening in Georgia, and it washed up to the corner that election cycle, and the state pretty much flipped completely. And so I was, of course, taking it all too personally, like it was about me.
of
And but you can't help but do that.
course.
But but I was very, I was very resentful that I didn't even win my home county that I had served and I felt bled for,
That's tough.
trying to do the right things. I passed Georgia's first lobbyist registration and reporting law where they had to report the gifts they gave legislators. That made me such a popular guy
Yeah, yeah,
under the Gold Dome, but it was extremely popular outside of the Gold Dome of the Georgia Capitol.
right.
And so I really felt like I'd done everything right to get such an insulting, overwhelming defeat was just I couldn't understand it. So I was a little sore. And when I saw everybody jumping Alvin, who I remembered was, you know, my dad's TV man and my sister's classmate, I accepted when he kind of stalked me on the street and we started up a conversation. The problem was he could never remain on the right conversation because he wanted to talk about the government illegal seizing his van 15 years before. And to him, that was the downfall of everything. And that after that, his father died, his mother died, and then his wife died, that they were all worried to death by the way the county had done Alvin and ruined his business by taking his van. So it just was not making any sense to me. And I found out and decided early on, well, if I am going to represent this guy, and when I try to right now to get him to talk about his wife, and he turns it into a conversation about a 1977 Chevy van, I do not think this is the kind of guy I would want to put on the stand. And so it was kind of understood that, you know, people would not understand how he could be so unwilling to talk about his wife. And so he kind of accepted it when I said it. But the problem was I was getting frustrated that he kept talking about the van. Well, first, he did not want to make an appointment. And my dad gave him my home number.
Oh boy.
And so I would get calls in the middle of the night. I'd also gone through a divorce. I was trying to start dating again. And, you know, I would have, you know, someone over and I would get these screaming calls from Alvin Ridley. And you could hear outside of the phone handset. And he was always seemed like on the side of a road screaming into a payphone. And so I realized he didn't have a phone anymore in his home. And this was, you know, the cell phones were around, but not a lot of people had them. So it was very frustrating to me. And so I made a compromise with him then and there, which was my first compromise. I said, Alvin, or I think I called him Mr. Ridley at the time. I said, Mr. Ridley, if you don't have to make an appointment. He didn't like people knowing where he was going to be at any given time.
Okay.
So I said, you don't have to make an appointment. Just drop by my office anytime you see my car there. And I'll stop what I'm doing and I'll talk to you. But please quit calling me at home unless it's the most dire emergency. So he agreed. And I premised it by saying, you and your wife were very private people. And I just kind of am as well. And I think that was the way to approach Alvin, was to acknowledge him.
Right.
And then say, okay, me too. So let's be alone.
Right.
Utilizing the open door policy and showing up at my office, and we would end up yelling at each other because he would always bring up the 1977 Chevy van illegal seize. And at one point in my office, I heard the word van and I went, the van. Oh, Lord. Well, Alvin went silent and I looked up and he had his eyes closed tight and his hands clasped together. He obviously thought I was praying. And he assumed the prayer position. And I thought, I can work with this. And so I continued. I said, dear Lord, please help Alvin understand that we really don't need to talk about the van right now. We need to talk about Virginia. And, you know, please help him understand, oh Lord. And from then on, as a part of every one of our meetings, we had a prayer where he would just sit and listen while I actually gave his legal advice. If I tried to do it outside of a prayer, he would interrupt me and scream at me. So
beautiful. That
was
awesome.
a wonderful compromise that we were able to do. Meanwhile, I'm kind of getting ridicule from the town having fallen from the political sky, suddenly that I'm associating with this guy, one of our lower judges commented that with concern, he said, folks are saying you two deserve each other. And I just took that as if this town doesn't like this guy and this town obviously doesn't like me, I'm going to help this guy. And still that was hard. It was so hard.
I'm sure.
Until and the way that finally got me in, completely locked in to helping Alvin Ridley, no matter what, was when my secretary stuck her head in the door with a phone slip and said, Congressman Deal called and wants to talk to you. Well, that's the guy that less than 2 years before had just whipped my ass in this congressional race. He had gotten elected as a Democrat. I had helped him. He switched parties after telling everybody he would never do such a thing. And he beat me badly. So he read the tea leaves. I mean, if you're thinking it from purely self-interest, he read the tea leaves and he did the right thing for him. I, grew up as a Southern Democrat. And I just felt like switching was very self-serving, that you should do it before you offer for a reelection and not after you've just gotten reelected.
Fair.
So after the 1994 election, Newt Gingrich from Georgia became speaker and was putting the heavy pressure because that was an adjacent district. And Nathan Deal switched. And so and then he whipped my ass. and now I'm getting a call from him. Well, Alvin's across the table and he just kind of straightens up like he's impressed. And I'm thinking he even thinks this is about him. And I just thought, because Alvin and later I learned Virginia had this they were paranoid about all the local and state governments. But for every ounce of paranoia and distrust they had about those governments, they had pounds of hope from the federal government. And that reared its head many times in this representation, where Alvin would do something and run to the feds for help. And while I haplessly tried to chase him down and get him to cooperate with me. So Alvin said, well, ain't you going to call the congressman back? And I thought, yeah, at the end of our prayer, I said, yeah, why not? And as I wrote in the book, I thought maybe he wants to get my opinion on something. Maybe it's a nice, peace offering. Maybe he's going to put me on a committee or something.
Sure.
And then I thought, hell no. Once you get beat in Georgia politics, it's pretty long lasting. And you have no power. Nobody wants to put you on any committees. So I called him back, and thank God I didn't put him on speakerphone, because when I got through the operator, the familiar voice of Nathan Deal comes on the phone. I hadn't talked to him since I conceded defeat. And he said, I need you to keep Alvin Ridley away from my congressional offices. So it was about Alvin. And I'm sitting there awkwardly thinking, and I said, well, Congressman, good to hear from you. I will pass it on. And then Deal added, he's scaring the ladies there. Well, Alvin was petitioning his government for help. And so he was very strong about his right to do that. And now suddenly he's getting cut off from that right. So I hung up the phone. I asked Alvin to, walk outside with me. For one, I didn't want to be overheard in the office saying this, but I had to think really fast. How am I going to break this to him? I'm already realizing how much hope he puts in the federal government. Now here's a whole branch of the federal government that is saying, I'm going to have you arrested if you come to my office again. And that's why Deal called me. He's giving the guy's lawyer notice. And once he gets that notice, the next time he shows up, he's subject to arrest for trespassing.
That concludes this episode from this mini-series, Wrong About Alvin, our exclusive interview with McCracken Poston Jr. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your support, and stay tuned. Another episode's coming.